Wibta if I don't share the inheritance I received from a friend with her daughter. I, female, 32 years old, recently received an inheritance following the death of my neighbor and close friend, Valerie, female, 68 years old. I met Valerie when I moved into my condominium in 2018, and she became my neighbor next door. Our residences are on the top floor and have balconies that are nearly connected. We would spend every Saturday morning outside tending to our plants and chatting. I learned that Valerie had been a widow since she was 55 years old. I got the sense that she had married young and never truly discovered who she was until after Gary's passing. I always believed that Valerie was all alone in the world. It turns out that Valerie had one child, a daughter named Sam, female, 44 years old. However, they had been estranged since the early 2000s. Valerie shared with me that Sam came out as gay shortly after graduating from high school, which was not well received by Gary. He informed Sam that she was no longer his daughter and kicked her out, telling her never to communicate with them or return home again. This situation broke Valerie's heart, and she regarded it as her greatest regret. She confided in me that she wished she had fought for Sam, but in that moment, she was so astonished that she stood by silently as it unfolded. When I first heard that story, I inquired if she had ever attempted to reach out. Valerie told me that she hadn't because she was uncertain how to start. Thus, I took to the internet and located Sam on Facebook. It appeared that Sam had successfully built a fulfilling life for herself. I assisted Valerie in composing a heartfelt message to Sam. Valerie expressed her apologies for everything and conveyed how much her viewpoints had evolved over the years. Valerie also requested the opportunity to rebuild their relationship. We sent the message and noticed that Sam had seen and possibly read it, but she never responded. About a month ago, I returned home from work to discover that Valerie had passed away on her balcony due to an embolism. I forwarded the link to her obituary and memorial page to Sam. I did not see Sam at the funeral. An attorney is managing all of Valerie's affairs. I thought I would simply grieve my friend's loss and eventually have a new neighbor. I never anticipated that I would be the sole person named in Valerie's will, nor did I expect to be left her entire estate. A few days ago, Sam sent me a message. She was angry and insisted that I return Valerie's possessions, claiming I had taken advantage of an elderly widow. I felt upset upon reading Sam's message and thought, who does she believe she is? She hasn't communicated with Valerie in literal decades and ignored Valerie's attempts to reconnect. Now that Valerie has passed, she thinks she is entitled to her belongings. I am now contemplating whether I should do something for Sam. I oscillate back and forth on whether Valerie would have wanted me to. Valerie was aware of Sam's whereabouts, so she could have included her somehow. The attorney I consulted stated that the inheritance is entirely mine and that Sam has no legal claim, but should I still offer Sam something? Update: I appreciate everyone who has commented and provided the external perspective I needed. I am astonished by the number of people who have responded to this. Initially, I was only hoping for a few responses to help me reflect. I would like to clarify certain details that I was unable to address in the original post due to character limits. First, I want to outline the timeline of events. Sam was expelled from the house in the early 2000s, likely in 2002. Gary passed away in 2011. Valerie sold the family home and downsized to her condominium in 2013, as the house was too large for just her. I moved into my condominium in 2018. I learned about Sam, Valerie wrote the letter, and we sent it to Sam in 2022. Valerie retired and established her will and estate at the end of 2023. Val passed away on January 23, 2025. The funeral occurred on January 31, 2025. I messaged Sam as soon as the funeral arrangements were finalized. Sam contacted me this past Sunday, February 23, 2025. To clarify some questions regarding the estate, it is currently undergoing the formal probate process. Valerie worked as a legal secretary for a family law firm, and the attorney she collaborated with specialized in estate law. She had a successful career there, and as part of her retirement package, that attorney assisted her in establishing her will and managing the estate. This attorney informed me that everything is being handled correctly, that it will be fully resolved in a few months, and that all of Valerie's wishes are being honored as intended. I have heeded Reddit's advice and will consult a different attorney concerning both my legal interests in the estate and how to communicate with Sam. I have yet to respond to her because I am uncertain how to proceed. Her initial message was extremely harsh and accusatory, which triggered my initial emotional and defensive reaction. I am attempting to follow Reddit's guidance and empathize with Sam's situation. However, that remains difficult, as Sam has sent me several additional messages demanding a response and calling me a heartless person and homophobic bigot, among other names. I will refrain from responding until I have spoken to the lawyer and can address the situation appropriately. I believe that Reddit is correct in suggesting that if Sam desires any sentimental items, she should receive them, as they might aid in her healing process. However, I want to clarify that the estate is modest and quite straightforward. Valerie only owned her condominium and her vehicle, the latter being more valuable to her than it is currently on the market. It is a 2014 model used for daily driving. I possess the spare key to Valerie's condominium and have gone in to clear out the kitchen and care for her plants, as I cannot bear to see them perish as well. It has been quite strange to be in that space without her. I have received permission to begin cleaning out the condo, though I am not to dispose of any items. I plan to spend this weekend sorting through her belongings and organizing them into boxes. I do not know what sentimental items I might discover, as Valerie did not display family photographs in her residence. There are no pictures of Sam or Gary, not even wedding photos. I cannot speak to the Valerie known to Sam. However, I understand that Valerie was an active member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in her younger years, but she had become non-religious by the time I met her. The Valerie I knew was not a bigot. She was a kind, loving, and accepting individual. She was aware of my bisexuality and judged me for it. She displayed a pride flag on her balcony and would attend pride parades as one of those supportive mothers and grandmothers who would embrace and uplift LGBTQ youth in need. I viewed her as someone striving to make amends with the universe. When I first heard the story about Sam, I was taken aback, as it did not align with the Valerie I had come to know. Valerie did maintain her own Facebook account and knew how to use it, but Sam was not easy to locate. It took me several months to find her. We utilized Facebook Messenger as our only means of communication with Sam. The message was a 4 or 5-page letter in which Valerie expressed everything and shared her innermost feelings. Valerie only attempted to reach out once, stating, "Sam is so much like her father, and I don't want to push her or hurt her further by pestering. I've conveyed everything I can until she responds." The only direct contact I have had with Sam was through the Facebook messages I sent regarding Valerie's passing. I believe that addresses everyone's inquiries. I thank you all for providing me with new perspectives. It has been beneficial. There's been significant interest in all of this, so if people want further updates following the probate process, I will do my best to provide them. Story 2. I told my husband I am not excited for a trip to Nick due to our baby. He got mad and stormed off, saying, "Forget it, we won't go." I, 24, female, am 15 weeks pregnant with our first child. My due date is August 17th. A few nights ago, my husband was having a conversation with our friends from college. I was not part of this discussion. We had only met them once in person when they came to our wedding. He has known them for nearly 7 years, and I have known them for around 4. One of them is about to get married. They were unsure about the date during their chat, but we had briefly spoken about the possibility of traveling to attend their wedding. Unfortunately, they informed my husband last night that they had set the wedding date for August 6th, and they understood that we would likely be unable to attend. My husband and the rest of the group talked about the possibility of another trip, given that we couldn't make it to the wedding. I am uncertain about the specifics of that conversation, but my husband came to me and started discussing a trip to New York City, suggesting that we could go in April of next year. I mentioned that it would be wonderful to see them, especially since we would be missing the wedding, but that we would have a small baby with us. The baby would be 8 months old by then. He explained that we would fly, that we wouldn't need a rental car, and that we would rely on public transportation. He also mentioned that we would be staying on Long Island, where some reasonably priced hotels are available. Please keep in mind that neither of us has ever been to New York City before, and that we come from a small town in the Midwest, where public transportation is non-existent. Upon hearing this, my mind immediately began to consider several potentially stressful aspects that would require planning and preparation. The baby flying for the first time, which could be quite stressful, properly packing for the flight and trip, including Transportation Security Administration regulations, and logistics for bringing a car seat and stroller, would those be checked with the luggage? The hustle and bustle of New York City, with its crowds and the need to walk everywhere. This feels exhausting to me, navigating subways. I have never been on one and have concerns about germs for the baby, my health and the health of the baby. I am unsure if our child will face any health issues, or if I might encounter postpartum complications. If they want to engage in activities in person, I would have the baby with me throughout, which could be disruptive or ruin the experience for everyone involved. The same applies to dining out or exploring the city. I tried to express to him that I might not feel comfortable with public transportation, reiterating that we would have a baby with us at all times. For those curious as to why we don't hire a babysitter, I do not think I could bear being away from my baby for an entire week on the opposite coast. He reacted angrily, scoffing, and declared, "Forget it. We just won't go," before leaving the bedroom. I was taken aback and called out to him, asking why he was so upset. He did not respond. I attempted to wait until things cooled down before discussing it again, but I was troubled by the situation. He doesn't typically become this angry. When I finally asked him about it, he replied, "Because you are not excited," to which I clarified that I never said no or that I did not want to go. I merely wanted to address the numerous logistics involved, which were stressing me out. He again grew angry, repeatedly insisting, "Forget about it, we won't go." We did not speak that night afterward, as I needed to go to bed, while he stayed up late since he had the day off. The following day, we exchanged few words until that evening. I had classes and work, but after 5 p.m., I called him as I typically do. He was helping his uncle build a cabinet, and I chatted with his aunt about the baby. I mentioned that I was going out to dinner with Kate, my best friend, whom I had not seen in 4 months. He asked where we were going, and I replied Chili's. He said, "Okay, love you and have fun." Kate and I spent an hour and a half catching up on life, discussing her work and school, and talking about baby-related topics. Feeling guilty for lingering at the table, we decided to drive across the parking lot to Target and walk around as we continued our conversation. As we were checking out, I noticed that he was calling. My phone had been on silent the entire evening. When I answered, he asked, "Why haven't you been answering your phone?" I apologized and explained that I had been with Kate the whole time and that my phone was on silent. He said, "Well, you could have at least sent me a text." I was getting worried. "I called you about 10 times. I expressed my regret for causing him concern and reassured him that I loved him and would call back shortly since I was about to get in my car. After saying goodbye to Kate, who asked if everything was all right, to which I responded affirmatively and joked about being in trouble for not answering, I got in my car and called my husband back. I informed him I was en route home. He again questioned why I hadn't answered my phone, and I reiterated that I was sorry, explaining that my phone was on silent and that I had been talking to Kate the entire time. He told me, "See you at home, love you," and we hung up. When I arrived home, I asked why he had called so many times, emphasizing that I had only been out for 3 hours, which is typical when I have dinner with Kate. He dismissed it, saying, "I was just worried and you weren't answering your phone." Feeling as though he was being dishonest, I pressed a bit further, stating that he knew I was with Kate and that we had just spoken around 5:30, so why was he worried? It turned out he was still angry about the New York City situation and had chosen to call me 10 times over the span of 20 minutes while I was with Kate. He then expressed that he simply wanted me to be excited but was disappointed with my reaction. I once more clarified that I had never declined or expressed disinterest in the trip. In fact, I had explicitly stated I would love to go, especially since we would miss the wedding in August. I explained that considering the logistics of traveling with a baby felt overwhelming and could potentially turn the trip into a stressful experience. I also mentioned that it felt like he had not taken the baby's needs into account or considered the necessary arrangements for traveling with an infant. I felt it would not be an amazing, fun trip where we could simply hang out with friends the entire time. He then asked, "Why do you always have to be this angry ball of stress? You aren't fun." I looked at him, fighting back tears, and walked away to give us both space. I cried in the living room, feeling as if he disliked me because I wasn't fun enough for him. After about 30 minutes, I approached him and said, "I apologize for not being as excited as you had hoped. I just wanted you to understand that the trip would be different because we would be traveling with a baby." He responded, "Well, I have traveled before with a baby, and it's not that hard. But if you are going to be stressed the entire time, it won't be enjoyable, and there's no point in going." The baby he referenced was his younger sister, and that trip was part of a family cruise. The tone he used was hurtful, prompting me to fight back more tears as I retreated to the bedroom and closed the door. Last night, I cried myself to sleep, and we have not communicated at all today since we are both at work. I feel like I'm losing my mind and cannot comprehend why he is suddenly being so hurtful. I have not had the chance to process what August will be like, let alone a trip to New York City with a baby who is yet to be born. I believe my concerns are reasonable or at least understandable. However, it feels as if he doesn't care. He claims he is not concerned about the baby at all, that he merely does not want me to spoil the trip with my stress. I don't understand why he is so fixated on this. I have been primarily focused on the baby, and while I would genuinely enjoy the trip and the opportunity to see the city, I now dread going because he has made me feel guilty for having legitimate concerns regarding the baby. I fear I would only worry that I would ruin his experience for him throughout the trip. Am I the antagonist in this situation? Story 3. I, F25, messed up, but I took him finding it hard to accept that I did worse during the breakup with my boyfriend, M25. How bad did I mess up? Backstory: long rant. So my apologies, my boyfriend, 25 years old, and I, 25 years old, began our relationship last year. Initially, it was quite tumultuous, especially given that I had just exited a relationship that left me with heightened anxiety and trauma related to infidelity. I spent a couple of months feeling terrified to fully commit to my boyfriend, not because I didn't want to, but rather due to a fear of experiencing pain again. Eventually, we decided to be exclusive, but approximately 4 months into our relationship, I discovered several things he had concealed and lied about. While none of it was particularly outrageous, it triggered feelings of discomfort for me, especially due to the dishonesty and deception. As a result, my anxiety manifested in unhealthy ways. This eventually led him to express uncertainty about his desire to be in a relationship with me, which is a valid sentiment, and since that point, I have been diligently working on healing my attachment issues. Throughout our time together, he has done a few minor yet hurtful things, such as searching for his past situationship, who had met his parents on Facebook. Furthermore, prior to our relationship, he had messaged her with the intention of hooking up, although she turned him down. He also concealed his use of pornography, which I had established as a boundary. Fast forward to November of last year. He uncovered a childhood trauma that left him feeling numb and reliving the experience. I supported him in every way I could, acknowledging his emotions and striving to create a safe environment for him. He later confessed to me that he had watched porn again, despite my clear boundaries against it. I was hurt and cried but chose to forgive him, understanding that his actions were likely tied to his complicated feelings about his trauma. Following that, he emotionally withdrew, repeatedly expressing doubt about wanting to be with me and even questioning his feelings of love for me. I tried to overlook this, realizing it might have stemmed from his depression. Eventually, I reached a breaking point. The continuous uncertainty about his love for me and his desire to remain single exhausted me. I made the difficult choice to end our relationship, not because I wanted to, but because I felt it was necessary for him. This decision was exceptionally tough, as I envisioned a future with him. Throughout the week-long breakup, we maintained communication. It was challenging for me to fully let go, as I had never wished for the situation to unfold this way. I discovered that he had unblocked, followed, and messaged a girl I had previously been concerned about because he had lied to me about her. Although he insisted nothing significant had occurred, I found it hurtful. I expressed my feelings to him, but he was notably cold in response. He stated we were no longer together, which I understood, but what truly stung was his lack of empathy and his failure to grasp why I was hurt. We stopped talking for 3 days. Afterward, he visited, and before we became intimate, I asked if he had been with anyone else. He said no. We continued seeing each other, and on the last night before his move to another state, I asked again, and he responded with another denial. However, his body language suggested otherwise. Trusting my instincts, I checked his phone and discovered that during those 3 days of silence, he had hooked up with a girl from Tinder. Additionally, he had messaged several contacts I was unaware of, attempting to connect with them on various new numbers and over 5 different dating apps, one of which was a fetish app. This revelation shattered me completely. We severed contact, and he relocated. 2 weeks later, he called, stating he was coming back and wanted to reconcile. Now, onto the current issue, where I faltered in our relationship and where I may need a reality check regarding my ego. Therefore, an unbiased perspective is necessary. After being apart for a while, I decided to look up a guy I had hooked up with once after high school. I had removed his contact information and deleted him from my phone when he attempted to reach out while I was in a relationship. Now that I was no longer in one and had no intention of meeting or hooking up with anyone new, I decided to search for him on Instagram and obtain his number. At this point, I was not communicating with anyone else, just him, and my intention was solely to hook up and nothing beyond that. When my boyfriend reached out, I severed contact with this guy, only responding after he mentioned being ghosted. I acknowledged that my behavior had been rude and reiterated that I had previously stated I did not want anything with him. This guy called me while I was with my boyfriend. Although I did not deceive my boyfriend regarding him, I hesitated to show him the messages between us. I allowed my boyfriend to go through the messages, and he now knows we had a sexual encounter. His feelings about this were justified, but what I find unjustifiable is that he labeled me a hypocrite. Now, for my own reality check. We agreed to give our relationship another chance, but initially, I was still very hurt and hard on him about the things he had done, particularly sleeping with someone else so soon after our breakup and lying about it, as well as being intimate with me shortly thereafter. Those emotions prompted me to express my hurt. We also sat down to browse his phone and eliminate any reminders from our breakup period, and I discovered some recent messages as he was still attempting to win me back. This triggered my anxious thoughts, but as I mentioned earlier, I have been working on healing that and have become more secure. Rather than berating him with it, I simply asked if this would be an ongoing concern for me. He was very accommodating and assured me that I had nothing to worry about. We handled that situation maturely. I managed to keep my petty and hurtful remarks towards him regarding his actions in check, all while never admitting to him that I had slept with someone else. I almost confessed and even stated that I had hooked up with someone, but when he inquired again, I denied it. This is where I made a mistake and lied. I lied out of fear that he would dismiss my feelings regarding his actions during our breakup. He had already been invalidating me, but now it seemed he was beginning to empathize with my feelings. The issue remains that I still never said anything, even after expressing my hurt over his behavior. I neglected to delete the messages because I forgot to, but even after the other guy messaged me again, I left them there in case my boyfriend discovered them, as I was too frightened to be honest. He does not believe my rationale because of my reaction when he asked to see the messages after the other guy called, wherein I suggested it was not the best time for that, as I was driving. I deceived him by not revealing that I had slept with someone else. I feel like a hypocrite for being so upset about what he did to me while knowing I had been intimate with this other person once, and even spent time together again, but I declined sex. Consequently, he is now calling me a hypocrite and has claimed that what I did was far worse. He insists that I have been projecting my insecurities onto him and asserts that he possesses a much more genuine character than I do. I fear my ego is preventing me from accepting his perspective, but part of me believes that none of this would have occurred had he not hurt me in the way that he did, and if we hadn't broken up, which I never wanted in the first place. I need you all to help me reflect on my ego and provide insight into his viewpoint, as my pain and ego are blinding me to his side of the situation. I do understand, but it is challenging to accept that I am a hypocrite for criticizing him about what he did to me. I apologize to him and recognize his pain, and it pains me to know that I hurt him in this manner because I have never cheated or even considered the idea. It hurts to know that I caused him heartache in this way. However, I am still hurt that he stated I cannot criticize him for his actions, and perhaps he is right. Story 4. Wibta, if I missed my grandma's funeral for my best friend's wedding dress shopping, I'm Mo. Context about my grandmother. My grandmother, who is in her late 80s, and I, a 32-year-old female, have never shared a close relationship. She was abusive to my mother and aunts and uncles while they were growing up and has always been quite judgmental, homophobic, and racist, which made me reluctant to spend time with her. Things changed somewhat about a decade ago when she became a bit more amiable. I've only seen her approximately once every other year since then. Her health has declined over the past few years, and we were honestly surprised she managed to hold on for as long as she did. She has been on hospice care for several months and has expressed more than once that she was ready to pass on. About 2 months ago, I said my goodbyes, assuming it would be the last time I would see her, as I live across the country. She has just passed away. My mother has visited her nearly every day for years, despite my grandmother often snapping at her and criticizing her as a terrible daughter, a behavior my mom attributes to dementia. Surprisingly, their relationship strengthened despite its rocky beginnings. Consequently, my mother is significantly affected by this loss. Although losing a loved one, particularly a parent, is always challenging, my mom's primary emotion is one of relief that my grandmother is no longer in pain. She recognized that my grandmother was prepared to leave this world, and the situation had been weighing heavily on both my mother and her siblings. Context on the wedding dress shopping. My best friend, a 30-year-old female, is getting married in 7 months, and I am honored to be her maid of honor. I relocated out of state from her last year, which has been difficult, but we make an effort to stay just as close. While we each have our own friends, none match the bond she and I share. For the past couple of months, we have arranged a specific weekend for me, her 3 bridesmaids, and her mother to travel and go dress shopping with her. She has set up all the appointments, and everyone has booked their travel plans since most of us live out of state. This is her second marriage, but her first one took place when she was quite young and did not involve a traditional wedding. Therefore, this time it is profoundly important to her to experience all the wedding traditions and make it grand, as she feels she missed out on much earlier. It is worth noting that I met her after her divorce, so I was not part of the first wedding. The dilemma. When my grandmother died, I informed my mother that there was only one date, a Saturday, that would not work for me regarding the funeral, the date of the dress shopping. Otherwise, I could travel and be there any day. Unfortunately, an aunt has a beach vacation booked starting this weekend, although she has not yet departed, and she did not want to miss her trip, so they are rescheduling the funeral for a week and a half from now, landing on that one date I am unable to attend. My mother mentioned that it was a collective decision to hold the funeral on that date, despite her awareness of my scheduling conflict. The day before, next Friday, would technically work for me, but my aunt is concerned that if her flight, set for the day prior, on Thursday, gets canceled, she would be stranded for an additional day. While this concern makes sense, it hinges on a hypothetical situation that is unlikely to happen. Additionally, she frequently goes on vacations, so this is not a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Regardless, my mother is now asking me to decide which event is more significant to me, which is frustrating. My best friend would be heartbroken if I cannot attend the dress shopping. Some might consider it trivial, but it holds significant importance for both of us for me to be present. Coordinating a new weekend would be quite challenging given our distance, and she would lose some deposits, with bridesmaids having to cancel non-refundable travel plans. She is also anxious about the timeline for a dress to arrive, among other things. While she could proceed with the dress shopping that day without me, I genuinely believe she would be deeply upset, even though she would understand. It wouldn't be directed at me personally. She would feel crushed by my absence, a sentiment I would share. Her bridesmaids have not been particularly supportive thus far. They are not very close, to be honest, and her mother can be quite overwhelming, so my friend was really counting on my support and positivity, as well as help in managing her mother during this special moment together. Additionally, I have a sentimental gift I plan to present her in person during this trip, which would be difficult otherwise due to our residing in different states and the fragility of the item, making shipping a concern. Now, I have to decide whether to attend the wedding dress shopping or go to my grandmother's funeral. If it comes down to what matters most to me, I would unequivocally prioritize attending the dress shopping because being there for my best friend is incredibly important to me. I was not close with my grandmother. I have already said my goodbyes, and I do not feel a personal need for closure. However, I anticipate my mother will guilt-trip me or speak poorly of me if I miss the funeral. I recently attended my step-grandmother's funeral, who was much closer to me than my biological grandparents, and I am sure my mother will comment to the family about how I participated in my father's wife's mother's funeral, but not in my own blood grandmother's funeral. She can be quite petty and is always mindful of her image in front of others. While I would like to ideally support my mother, she has repeatedly stated that she is not feeling sadness, but rather relief since this was long overdue. Additionally, my mother has many siblings and close friends who are local and available to support her. In short, I am torn between attending the wedding dress, shopping to support my best friend, which is the most significant to me, or going to the funeral to avoid negative comments from my mother, even though I do not believe that is a justifiable reason or merely a moral obligation. Would I be the antagonist if I chose the wedding dress shopping over the funeral? I am also contemplating the option of doing the dress shopping and then flying to see my mother that evening after the funeral, simply to be there for her, although I won't actually attend the funeral. However, I'm uncertain if that would genuinely make a difference. The services commence at 9:30 a.m. and extend into the early afternoon. While the dress shopping is scheduled from 9 a.m. to 3:30 p.m., I considered the possibility of attending the funeral and face timing during the dress shopping from a secluded location at the funeral, such as outside, but realistically, the timing will not allow for that as they directly overlap. Please assist me.